Okay, good morning. Welcome to Online with the CMC. Just Dewey It, the basics of Dewey Decimal Classification. Mary Cornell will be your presenter today. They will be answering questions at the end of the presentation. In the chat, I'm going to put a link to our CMC evaluation form, and we would appreciate it if you could fill that out. We love your feedback. This session is being recorded, and the link will be sent to everybody who registered in L2. The slides without the notes are in L2 right now, if you want to grab those and follow along, and the slides with the notes will be uploaded after the presentation. And then next month, we will be presenting AI in the Library World Part 3 on October 9th, so hopefully you will join us then. Okay, Mary, take it away, please.
Hello, all. Welcome to Online with the CMC. I am your presenter today, Mary Cornell. As Pam relayed, our presentation today is Just Dewey It, the basics of Dewey Decimal Classification. Our agenda today includes defining what the Dewey Decimal System is, that's DDC. Then we'll have a short vocabulary lesson where we look at some important Dewey terminology. Next, we'll look at the pieces of a Dewey number. After that, we'll look briefly at the different classes of Dewey. Following this, we'll examine the Dewey tables. Then we'll look at the basic criteria for choosing a number. We're going to talk the basics of number building in Web Dewey and some class examples, and we'll finish up with our resources. As an FYI, a good deal of this was created based on the technical introduction to Dewey created by OCLC as part of the longer Dewey Decimal Classification training. You can find a link to that training on the resources slide. So firstly, in looking at the Dewey Decimal System, let's talk about classification in general. Quote, we classify items in order to keep similar items together and by extension, different items apart. Library classification schemes and tools allow us to allocate a class mark to every item based on its subject's content so that we can keep all related items together on the shelves. In other words, a class number assigned to a document reflects its subject's content. A library classification scheme has a number of objectives, such as assigning a shelf address so that every document on the library shelves has a specific location, co-allocating items, whereby documents on the same or similar subjects are placed together on the library shelves to enable users to find items on the same subject in one place within a library, and linking items, the catalog record of an item to the item itself on the shelf. Users look through the catalog, and once the items have been found, the corresponding call numbers can be used as reference to locate items on the shelves, end quote. We can glean some basic information about the Dewey Decimal System's history via OCLC. Quote, the Dewey Decimal Classification, DDC, system is a general knowledge organization tool that is continuously revised to keep pace with knowledge. The system was conceived by Melville Dewey in 1873 and first published in 1876. The DDC is published by OCLC Online Computer Library Center, Inc. OCLC owns all copyright rights in the Dewey Decimal Classification and licenses the system for a variety of uses. The DDC is the most widely used classification system in the world. Libraries in more than 140 countries use the DDC to organize and provide access to their collections, and DDC numbers are featured in the national bibliographies of more than 60 countries. Libraries of every type apply Dewey numbers on a daily basis and share these numbers through a variety of means, including WorldCat. Dewey is also used for other purposes, examples as a browsing mechanism for resources on the web. The DDC has been translated into over 30 languages. Translations of the latest edition of the DDC are completed, planned, or underway in Arabic, French, German, Italian, Norwegian, Spanish, Swedish, and Vietnamese." End quote. The current senior editor for the Dewey Decimal Classification System is Alex Quiros. Alex usually also has an intern that is helping with projects as well. The Dewey Decimal System is used worldwide, as mentioned, and is most frequently used in the United States, utilized in public libraries. So next, we're going to look at some basic vocabulary that applies to the DDC. First, we're going to look at the parts of Dewey. So we have schedules, which are listings of subjects and their subdivisions arranged in a systematic order with notation given for each subject and its subdivisions. The series of DDC numbers 000 to 999, their headings and notes. Tables, either tables 1 through 6 or T1 through T6 if you're looking at them on Web Dewey. These are tables that allow us as catalogers to extend on Dewey numbers for more specificity. The manual, a guide to the use of the DDC that is made up primarily of extended discussions of problem areas in the application of the DDC. In the schedules and tables, see references indicate where relevant discussions are located in the manual. So the relative index plus associated terms. The index to the DDC, it is called relative because it shows the connections between subjects and the disciplines in which they appear. In the schedules, subjects are arranged within disciplines. In the relative index, subjects are listed alphabetically under each subject. The disciplines in which the subject is found are listed alphabetically. In the print version of DDC, the disciplines are indented under subject. In the electronic version, the disciplines appear as subheadings associated with the subject. So to give you all a visualization of what the relative index looks like in Web Dewey, these are terms that appear with the subject Quakers. We have two LCSH subjects that pertain to Quakers, and then below that are terms you would find in the relative index that pertains to Quakers. Some subjects have terms that aren't as near to the topic as we see with our Quakers example, but the relative index terms do all appear very similarly in Web Dewey as we see here. So continuing on, some other helpful terms to consider is how the system is defined once you start looking deeper at the schedules. So first we have disciplines. Disciplines are an organized field of study or branch of knowledge. Example, 200 for religion, 530 for physics, 364 for criminology. In the DDC, subjects are arranged by disciplines. Then we have subjects, which are an object of study, also called topic. It may be a person or a group of persons, thing, place, process, activity, abstraction, or any combination of these. In the DDC, subjects are arranged by disciplines. A subject is often studied in more than one discipline. Example, marriage is studied in several disciplines, such as ethics, religion, sociology, and law. In our example above, we see Christianity, which is a discipline, and below that, we see that different subjects are classified within it, and this is just in the 200s. Hierarchy, the arrangement of a classification system from general to specific. In the DDC, the length of the notation and the corresponding depth of indentation of the heading usually indicate the degree of specificity of a class. C references and centered entries are used to indicate exceptions to the notational hierarchy. And then we have two different kinds of hierarchy. So we have the structural hierarchy, which every subject is subordinate to, i.e. part of, all the broader subjects above it. Notation hierarchy, hierarchy expressed by length of notation, any given subject is usually subordinate to the topic whose notation is 1 digit shorter. We'll look at some examples of both of these on the next slide. So first, we have structural hierarchy. As relayed, every subject is subordinate to all the broader subjects above it. In our example for drawing human figures is at the top of the hierarchy at 743.4, and a subordinate subject below that would be Bones' skeletal system. So drawing the skeletal system of a human being would be classified under 743.47. Then looking at a notational hierarchy, this is any given subject is usually subordinate to the topic whose notation is 1 digit shorter. So our example is for child psychology. I couldn't grab this directly from WebDewey because Dewey is expansive in its view. But what this image is showing us is how the change of a single digit can help us build a more specific classification number. So we went from the overall class in 100 to the discipline psychology in 150 to a subject in 155 of differential and developmental psychology. And then by adding the 4 after the decimal point, lengthening the notation, we arrive at the classification of child psychology. Now, we could go on and add a lot more vocabulary, as there are 13 pages of glossary terms in DDC. We will end our vocabulary lesson here, though, with other terms coming up as we go along. The full glossary is linked in our resource slide later. So now let's look at some pieces of the Dewey number. By the way, you're going to see some duality and how we define terms, because truly we are at the core looking at 3 numbers that are expanded on. So please, if you start to get overwhelmed, it's okay. The 3 pieces we're going to look at are divisions, sections, and notations. So a division. The second level of subdivision in the DDC represented by the first 2 digits in the notation. Example, a 6-4 and 640 home and family management. This works very closely with our before mentioned terms of subjects and disciplines. This is more specifically the second digit in our 3-digit Dewey number. The first number in our example sets it as a 300 in social sciences, and then adding on the second digit allows for more specificity, like law, education, etc. Section. The third level of subdivision in the DDC, represented by the first 3 digits in the notation. Example, 641 in food and drink. Using more of the 300s, we're looking at the first few sections of education. So you have 0 for the broader education materials, 1 for schools and their activities and special education, and then the 2 to 4 section is for specific levels of education. Notation. Numerals, letters, and/or symbols used to represent the main and subordinate divisions of a classification scheme. In the DDC, Arabic numerals are used to represent the classes. Example, notation 07 from table 1 and 511.3 from the schedules. So following along with our education example, we're looking at secondary education in 373. This looks primarily at the digits past the main subdivision. So we're looking at 373.1, organization and activities in secondary education, 373.2, secondary schools and programs of specific kinds, levels, curricula, focus, and lastly, 373.3 to 373.9. So that's secondary education and specific continents, countries, or localities. So next, we're looking at something that's probably quite familiar for any of you that know Dewey. The Dewey Decimal System breaks down into main classes, which are the 10 major subdivisions of the DDC, represented by the first digit in the notation. Example, you have 3 in the social sciences. The first class is the 000, which is general knowledge, computer science, information. This class includes topics like computer software at 005, library and information science at 020, and journalism at 070.4. The second class is 100 is philosophy, parapsychology, and occultism and psychology. This class includes topics like one of my most used classification numbers in psychology, self-improvement and analysis at 158.1. Then we have astrology at 133.5 and political ethics at 172. The third class is the 200s, which encompasses widely religion, including beliefs, attitudes, and the practices of individuals and groups. This class includes topics like the Roman Catholic Church at 282, prayer books at 204.33, and a branch of Islam called Sufism at 297.4. The fourth class is the 300s that includes many topics in social sciences and behavioral sciences. This class contains topics such as families at 306.85, national parks at 363.68, and holidays at 394.26. The fifth class is the 400s, which encompasses most topics in languages. The earlier subdivisions look at the linguistics of language, think the alphabet at 411. The 420s to the 490s look at specific languages, from modern French at 448 to Arabic at 492.7 and more. The sixth class is the 500s that encompasses science, math, animals, and more. This class includes subjects such as chemistry at 540, mammals at 599, and marine ecology at 577.7. The seventh class is the 600s that covers topics in technology like sewing, engineering, and more. This class includes subjects such as gardening at 635, wood construction at 694, and vegetarian cooking at 641.5636. The eighth class is the 700s, or art and recreation. This includes topics such as ice hockey at 796.962, painters from the United States at 759.13, and domestic architecture at 728. The ninth class is the 800s, which encompasses all of literature. This class, like the 400s, includes broader topics in literature like figures of speech at 808.032, but the 810s to the 890s look at literature written by different nationalities, such as modern English fiction at 823.92 and Japanese poetry at 895.61. We'll talk a little more on the 800s later in the presentation. The last class of Dewey is the 900s, which encompasses most of history and geography of the world. This class includes not only travel in India at 915.4, but also looks at ancient history in Egypt at 932, and more modern history in the Democratic Republic of Congo at 967.51. So we're going to look next at the Dewey tables over the next couple of slides. Per LIS Academy, Dewey tables are helpful as they, quote, allow librarians to add further specificity and detail to the main classification numbers, which is essential for a more precise arrangement of library materials, end quote. This is also the area of Dewey where you most often encounter number building. So first we have T1. This is the standard subdivisions, which according to OCLC, quote, the following notation is never used alone, but may be used as required with any regular scheduled number, end quote. This includes the 01, philosophy and theory, 02, miscellany, 03, dictionaries, encyclopedias, 04, special topics, 05, serial publications, 06, organizations and management, 07, education, research, related topics, 08, groups of people, and 09, history, geographic treatment, and biography. One of the most important notes from this table is the following, quote, when adding to a number from the schedules, always insert a decimal point between the third and fourth digits of the complete number. Unless other instructions are given, the terminal zeros in a main class or division number should be dropped before adding a standard subdivisions, end quote. So to build a number with the standard subdivisions, we're going to start at 929.2 for family histories. From there, we're going to add Ireland on from the 09 subdivisions, which would be 09415 at Ireland. This number put together is 929.209,415, which is family histories in Ireland. Second, we have T2. This table looks at geographic areas, historical periods, and biography. This table does, as you would think, build off the 09 subdivision from Table 1. The notes from this table relay: the following numbers are never used alone, but may be used as required, either directly when so noted or through the interposition of notation 09 from Table 1, with any number from the schedules. This breaks down with the notations 001 to 008 standard subdivisions, 009 history, 01 to 05 historical periods, 1 areas, regions, places in general, oceans and seas, 2 biography, 3 to 9 specific continents, countries, localities, extraterrestrial worlds. Continuing our Ireland example, we start with Ireland and the 900 schedule at 941.5. There is already a built number for Ireland during the Tudor period of 1485 to 1603 at 941.505. If you want to play with building a number with T2, you can start with 9 in the schedule, add 415 for Ireland, and then add from the historic periods notation, which is 901 to 905, which would give us 09031, which is the historical period of the 16th century from 1500 to 1599. This wouldn't cover the entirety of the Tudor period, but would cover most of it. This built number would be 941.509031. As there is already a pre-built number in this case, I would use that one, but the historical periods notation does give you options. Third, we're going to look at T4, because I would rather give the T3 table some more space on the next slide. But this table explores notations for individual languages and language families. As you may surmise from what this table provides subdivisions for, this table may be used as required by add notes under subdivisions of specific languages or language families, or with a base number for individual languages identified by 420 to 490. This table includes the standard subdivision seen in T1, but also 1 to 5, description and analysis of the standard form of the language, 7, historical and geographic variations, modern non-geographic variations, and 8, implied linguistics. So Ireland isn't an option here, of course, but Irish Gaelic at 491.62 is. Say you have a book that is about teaching a user about Irish Gaelic vocabulary. You would start with 491.62, then go to the T4 table to 8 implied linguistics, then add 81 to the language number to reflect the specific nature of the item. So overall, our number would be 491.6281. Fourth, we have the T6. The table looks at languages. This includes the notations 1 to 9 languages. If you go into this, it does break down by different regions of the world and languages spoken, written in those areas. This table should never be used alone, but may be used with those numbers from the schedules and other tables to which the classifier is instructed to add notation from Table 6. This can be used for items like translations or from a specific region. The notes do relay several instructions, but the one I have run across myself is that a cataloger should use the classification for modern languages unless an item specifies ancient or older languages. I did get to catalog an item in ancient Greek once, and thus had to use a different part of this table. So using Irish Gaelic again, we're going to look at a translation of the Quran into Irish Gaelic. So we start with translations of the Quran at 297.1225. From here, we're navigated to the T6 table, and then to the 9.1 notation for Celtic languages. And there we find Irish Gaelic at 9162. So a translation of the Quran would be found at the Dewey number 297.12259.162. The T3 tables look at arts and literature. For each of these tables, we will need to go in a little deeper to find out how each works with the scheduled numbers. Of note, I'm going to show the number building for these tables in later slides as they can get complicated. So T3A, this table looks at subdivisions for works by or about individual authors. This breaks down further in the table as specific forms. 1 for poetry, 2 for drama, 3 for fiction, 4 for essays, 5 for speeches, 6 letters, and 8 miscellaneous writings. The instructions do prescribe that when using specific forms by researching the schedule 810 to 890 to find the base number for the language, the base number may be identified in an add note. Then you can consider what form the item is. For instance, fiction. However, the table lastly instructs you go back to the 810 to 890 schedule and see if there is an applicable period table or a historical period already created in the schedule. T3B. T3B allows for you to create a subdivision for works by or about more than one author. T3B allows for you to consider collections and collections of specific forms as found originally in T3A. The T3B does let you know that this table is limited to literatures of specific languages. To note, you can also add authors in a collection that write in the same language, but from different parts of the world. But it takes a little more work to build this. T3C. This table allows for additional notation for arts and literature subjects. This covers the standard subdivisions as well as 1. Arts and literature displaying specific qualities of style, mood, viewpoint. 2. Literature displaying specific elements. 3. Arts and literature dealing with specific themes and subjects. 4. Literature emphasizing subjects. And 8 to 9, literature for and by groups of people. Unlike T3B, T3C cannot be used alone. This is probably one of the most complicated areas of the T3 tables, as when getting into the rules of it, numbers must be built in a specific order, but there are even flowcharts to guide you through the process. And then lastly, we have T5. This table looks at ethnic and national groups. It can never be used alone and works in close correlation to the standard subdivision of 08 groups of people. One of the notes in this that also works similarly as the 08 subdivision is, in this table, racial groups are mentioned in connection with a few broad ethnic groupings. Example, a note to class Black people of African origin at T596, Africans and people of African descent. Concepts of race vary. A work that emphasizes race should be classed with ethnic group that most closely matches the concept of race described in the work. This table includes 05, peoples of mixed ancestry with ethnic origins from more than one continent, 09, Europeans and people of European descent, and 1 to 9, specific ethnic and national groups. We're going to jump back to our Irish example and create a number for Irish Americans. We'll start at 973, and this is the history of the United States, and then go to 973.04, which is about specific ethnicities, and start from there. This takes us to the T5 table, and then I'm going to go to the section about specific ethnicities and national groups. I thought at first that Irish would be in 2, which is British, English, Anglo-Saxons, but this doesn't include the Irish. I'm going to go down to 9, which is other ethnic and national groups, and then 9-1, which is Celts. Then we find the Irish at 9162. So our number about Irish Americans would be 973.049162. So now that we have a basic concept of the classes and tables, we need to consider how would we use the two to help classify an item. The basic procedure for this would be as follows. Determine the subject. This should follow the same general rule as the subjects you choose. The first subject is the most important in the book and should also be used for classification. Translate subject into scheme representation. Determine the disciplinary focus of the subject. Consider what different disciplines your subject could be under. Relative index is a guide to the schedules, but schedules must be consulted. If none of the disciplines seem to fit it exactly, you could look at the relative index for additional terms. Read instructions, follow the hierarchy. The instructions can help explain how your subject would fit in the disciplines and what the overarching subject is in a particular schedule range. Pay attention to your author's intention. This is the best place to go if your subject has multiple options. Did the author mean the item to be a piece that focused on social ideas? Is it more based on religious views? This can help you pinpoint a discipline to start in and go from there. And then lastly, follow the basic rules. All right, so now we're going to look at number building. So this is harkening back to what we talked about with the tables. And this is taking you through how we're going to build a specific number. So we have a collection of poetry by Irish author W.B. Yeats. So we'll start in the 820 range because this schedule includes Irish authors, even though it is listed as English and Old English literatures. Then we'll go to the subdivision range of 821 to 828. 821 listed as the section for poetry. When we go to 821, this section is broken down by time period. We know, thanks to some double checking on my part, that Yeats first published works in the 1880s. This time period is listed as the Victorian period under the subdivision 8. So overall, Yeats's poetry would be classified at 821.8. Of note, some authors that are more well known could also be searched by their name in WebDewey, and they may be indexed in a particular Dewey number. We are next going to look at the T3B. So we have a book in hand that is a collection of Irish horror short stories. To build this, we'll start in the 820s for English literature and authors. 823 is English fiction, and then we'll go to table T3B and choose specific kinds of fiction at 308, and then dig a little deeper in adventure fiction until we find horror fiction. Then to add to the collection aspect of the book and add 08 for a collection. This puts our number at 823.0873808. If this collection were from a certain time period, you could add that as well to your number. And now we're going to look at T3C. So we're not going to go too deep into this process, but we're going to create a quick built number with the T3B and T3C tables as the number for a collection of Irish short stories about plants. We start in 823, then navigate to the T3B-T-3 for specific kinds of fictions and choose realistic fiction in 3/083. This will take us then back to the table T3B, and from there we'll choose T3B 1/02 to 1/07:08, which is collections of literary texts, and then move down to literature displaying specific features or emphasizing subjects or for and by groups of people at T3B 1/02 to 1/07:081 to 089. This action takes us into the T3C table. From there, we choose 3 for arts and literature dealing with specific themes and subjects, 3, 6 for natural physical phenomena, mathematics, and finally to 3, 6, 4 for plants. This creates the number overall for this collection at 823.083.08364. I also wanted to talk about the flow chart that I used from the T3B table, which is something I visually utilized in one of our number building slides. It helped visualize what worked and didn't work when I was building a number. It may not always seem this straightforward, but this is where the rules or notes in these tables can also step in to help. And I have the PDF for this on L2 for us to utilize if we ever want to. So next, we're going to look at some class examples based on real-life items. So our first example is for a book by Illinois author Nick Offerman that was published in 2016 called Good Clean Fun: Misadventures in Sawdust at Offerman Woodshop. According to the summary on Offerman's website, this tells us about Nick and his ragtag crew of champions wanting to share their experience of working at the woodshop and tell readers about their passion for the discipline of woodworking and teach you how to make a handful of their most popular objects along the way. I could absolutely cheat and just look at the OCLC record for this, but I automatically thought of the 4 headings on our slide. We know this is stories from the Offerman Woodshop, hence that inclusion. We also know that the book is offering to teach readers woodworking skills and talk about woodworking. If you're I'm going to catalog this in the numerical order cataloger, your heading could become the Offerman Woodshop, which is an authorized heading, and a subfield B of anecdotes, since it seems that this book is more about personal stories, which would fall under anecdotes, and woodworking with a subfield B of anecdotes. I may add humor as a genre term since that still comes into play. So I go to WebDewey and search woodworking, and this takes me directly to 684.08. I could then see if I can add anecdotes as well to this number, but when I went to add that number, I find that that takes you to the standard subdivisions, and there's no option for anecdotes number building of the standard subdivisions. However, I know different kinds of writing are in the T3A table, so I go to that table, look through options of writing scopes, and there is an option for miscellaneous writings. Going deeper into that notation, we find anecdotes there. However, the notes for the section tell us to look at the manual for the section, and it relays you can add the 02 from the T3A table if it's, quote, for humorous literary works without identifiable literary form. As these are anecdotes, which are a literary form, we cannot add the 02. Therefore, our Dewey number is 684.08. So admission, I cataloged this one a long time ago, which I was told wasn't a long time ago, but it feels that way. A few things about this Brandt automatic cashier from 1962. It belonged to a bank in Grayville, Illinois, and is a part of a collection at Groff Memorial Library. If this belonged to no collection or bank, I might catalog it differently. However, let's catalog it like it does pertain to the information supplied. So this is a coin-changing machine, but pertains to the history of a bank in Grayville, Illinois. We're going to start with making this about the history of the bank itself at 332.1. Then to add the geographic information, we'll be directed to the standard subdivisions table and choose 09 for history and geographic treatment, which will take us to the image above. This adds the 09 notation and takes us into the more specific areas we can add to our number. Of note, you can rarely add a geographic number that is for a city. Usually only big cities like Chicago and New York City, etc., would have their own Dewey number. Otherwise, Dewey is divided by country, state, and county or smaller geographic area. So we're going to choose United States, specific states, which would be Illinois, and then we're going to look for the county Grayville is in, which is White County. And that leaves us at our overall number of 332.10977,396. Our last class number is another one I cataloged a while back. It is, as the cover states, a brief history of Kewanee parks in Kewanee, Illinois. So we're going to start by searching for parks in Dewey, and this takes us to 333.783. Like in our last example, we'll want to go to T1 to add the geographic information from the 09. Kewanee is in Henry County in Illinois, so we'll need to look for that once we get into the geographic areas. We will then add the geographic area to our initial number, which leaves us with 333.783,0977,338 for parks in Henry County. Next, we have our resources here, including that technical introduction to Dewey. And then on the call today, we have Barb Scobie, Dr. Pam Thomas, myself, Eric McKinney, Kat Anderberg, Ryan Rafferty, Katie Roberts, and Andrea Joysta. Any questions?
Hi, Mary, thanks. No, we don't have any questions right now. Let me unmute people in case if they want to unmute themselves. So you are now allowed to unmute yourself if you can do so. Again, just a reminder to rename yourself. If you don't have your first name, last name, for instance, if I was just logged in as Pam or P. Thomas, I would go to the Participants tab, which is down on the bottom, open that up, hover over my name, click on the 3 ellipses, and rename myself. Greatly appreciated if all of you can do that, because it helps me reconcile the L2 and Zoom rosters. Still no questions. Again, a reminder that next month we will be covering AI. Hang on. Part 3, AI in the Library World, Part 3, that's October 9th at 10. Again, this is being recorded, and we will send out the link probably early next week to everyone who's registered in L2. And Mary will be uploading the slides with the notes after the presentation is over today. Nobody has any questions? Oh, here we go. Paul asked, can you clarify again the difference between the schedules and the classes of DDC, please?
So technically, the schedules and the classes are the same thing. That's what I was talking about earlier when I said there may be some duality in terms, because as far as I can tell, and I read this multiple times in the glossary going, they've got to be different. Technically, they are the same thing. The schedules, it may be better to say the schedules include everything between 000 to 999. Well, the classes are those each individual, like 100, 200, 300, 400, etc.
And then he added, and then the schedule is published year after year.
Yeah.
Is my thinking correct?
I think that's how they're doing it right now. And that's how they usually do it, yes. So like everything's in chronological order if that's what you're trying to relay. Okay.
All right, any other questions? Tony says, on a similar note, can you clarify the difference between a class and a division?
Okay. Let me get back into my notes here. I don't want to give you bad information. Okay, so a division, the second level. So you have the class, which is your first digit. So your class would be like the 3, which is, say, 3 for social sciences, but then your division would actually be 3-4 for law or 3-7 for education. So your division is your first 2 digits of your number. You're welcome.
Jessica says, please excuse me if this is covered during a point. I had to step away from the desk. If a call number begins to get very long, in other words, too long to fit on the book spine for a label, is there a good cutoff point rule?
Oh, goodness. I think the best cutoff rule is try to keep it as specific as you need for your overall collection. This is very much a library by library cataloger's judgment. If you know that it's going to cause an issue, to say like stop it at just the geographic area and not include the classes of people, you may want to include that. And it's really about the individual item too. So if you feel like it would be a disservice to the item to not include a longer number, but more than anything, you just want to make sure it's as specific as you really need it to be for the item. I know that when I used to work in a children's section, they would say we want 2 places after the decimal point and that's it. That can be a huge disservice to an item, though, if, say, like, you're in cooking and it's not just about American cooking, but also about Italian American cooking. So you really just have to consider the items and how it's working within your collection.
And the same with holidays. It's like,
oh yeah,
in my opinion, it's a bad choice to only go so many points past the decimal point. Because then it's not really a valid classification number when you arbitrarily just cut it off somewhere. That would be like if I decided my last name was too long, which it isn't. But I was just going to go by the first 3 letters of my last name because that was just long enough.
But in all fairness, the holiday Dewey classification number is also very long, especially when you start adding months and whatnot. So
I know. And especially on children's books, which are typically very thin, but.
That would be a really great question. So the question is, are there any plans to assign subjects to unassigned numbers in Dewey? That would very much be in the hands of the senior editor, Alex Quiros. I know one of the things that I talked to him about at ALA was working with, and this might go over some people's heads, so please don't be concerned, working with what are called SACO and NACO funnels to also go through and do some number creation. So they may use those additional like unassigned numbers for things like that in the future.
And Dewey is definitely not stagnant.
No,
it does change. So
no. They're working on the 200s right now to make them more specific and more
inclusive.
Yeah.
Any other questions? It doesn't just have to be about today's topic. It could be just general cataloging questions as well. We will try to answer those.
I will say, if there's any questions that you don't think of now, but you want to have an answer to later, you can always email us at our general email, and we will answer them as best as we can.
And I included the CMC evaluation form link. Once again, it will also be in the L2 message when I send out the recording link. But for those of you who were not here at the beginning of the webinar, the link is in the chat again. Okay, Tony says, you mentioned earlier about cheating and looking at OCLC for an assigned number. When are cases when you would build your own number versus looking to OCLC?
Most often that happens when I'm creating an original, but even then I might still go into WorldCat if I'm creating an original and I'm like, well, I'm not really sure where I would put this, and look for books that are similar topics or similar subjects. Because I know I've done that before when I've had a very specific book, say like about a specific group of people in a specific time period, and sometimes I have no idea where that would be in Dewey. But if I look at a similar topic book in WorldCat, that will give me a place to start. So yeah, usually it's originals. Welcome.
Okay, any other questions? Okay, I'm gonna stop the recording.